The wagon wheels creaked against the dusty trail as Mei Lin clutched her small bundle of belongings. Her arranged marriage to James Morrison, a rancher she had never met, was supposed to be her escape from poverty in China. But as the wagon pulled up to the modest ranch house, her heart sank. James stood on the porch, his face hard as stone, arms crossed over his chest. "You're not what I expected," he said without greeting, looking her up and down with obvious disappointment. Mei Lin's English was limited, but his tone said everything. She bowed her head, understanding that her dreams of a new life were already crumbling. The marriage broker had painted a picture of a kind man seeking a wife for companionship. Instead, James seemed angry that she wasn't the delicate, submissive woman he had imagined. Her sun-darkened skin from working in rice fields and her calloused hands told the story of hard labor, not the pampered life of a wealthy merchant's daughter the broker had promised him. "I paid good money for a proper wife," James muttered, more to himself than to her. Not some field hand. Mei Lin's cheeks burned with shame. She had worked for years to save money for this journey, learning basic English phrases and dreaming of a home where she might find happiness. Her family had sold their last possessions to pay for her passage, believing she would send money back once settled. Now she stood in front of a man who saw her as damaged goods. The ranch foreman, Tom Bradley, helped unload her trunk from the wagon. He was an older man with kind eyes who had worked for James's family for 20 years. Tom gave Mei Lin an encouraging nod, sensing her distress. "Mrs. Morrison," Tom said gently, "I'll show you to the house." James waved dismissively. "Put her things in the back room. She can earn her keep helping with chores until I decide what to do with her." The next weeks passed in painful awkwardness. James barely spoke to Mei Lin except to give orders. She cooked, cleaned, and tended the vegetable garden, trying to make herself useful. At night, she lay on the narrow cot in the small back room, listening to James moving around the house, and wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. James had his own struggles. His previous wife had died in childbirth 3 years earlier, along with their baby. The grief had hardened him, making it difficult to open his heart again. When a marriage broker had suggested a Chinese bride, he thought it might be easier, a practical arrangement without the complications of love. But seeing Mei Lin's hopeful face when she arrived had stirred feelings he wasn't prepared to handle. One morning, Mei Lin was hanging laundry when she overheard James talking to his neighbor, Frank Henderson, by the fence. "She's not working out, Frank," James said. "I'm thinking of sending her back." "That seems harsh," Frank replied. "She seems like a hard worker. Tom says she's been fixing up that garden real nice." "It's not about work. It's about fit. She's not what I need in a wife." Mei Lin's hands shook as she continued hanging sheets. The words cut deep because she had begun to develop feelings for James, despite his coldness. She admired his dedication to the ranch and had caught glimpses of kindness when he thought no one was watching, like when he gently handled injured animals or left extra food for the barn cats. That evening, as James sat on the porch reviewing account books, Mei Lin approached with a cup of coffee. She had been practicing English words with Tom's help, wanting to communicate better. "Mr. Morrison," she said carefully, "I know I'm not what you want. I try harder, learn better English, be better wife." James looked up, surprised by her directness. For the first time, he really looked at her, not as a disappointment, but as a person trying her best in an impossible situation. Her dark eyes held determination mixed with sadness. "Mei Lin," he said, using her name for the first time since she arrived. "It's not about trying harder. Sometimes things just don't work out. Please," she whispered. "I have nowhere to go. Family in China think I'm married. Cannot go back with shame." James felt an unexpected stab of guilt. He had been so focused on his own disappointment that he hadn't considered her position. She was thousands of miles from home, dependent on his goodwill for survival. The next day brought an early autumn storm. Mei Lin was in the garden when the rain started, rushing to save the vegetables she had carefully nurtured. James watched from the house as she worked frantically in the downpour, her dress soaked through, determined to protect the plants. Something shifted in his chest. This woman, who owed him nothing given his treatment, was still fighting to contribute to his home. He grabbed his coat and ran outside. "Come inside," he called over the wind. "The vegetables aren't worth catching pneumonia." Mei Lin looked up, rain streaming down her face. "Garden important. Food for winter." James took her arm gently. "You're more important than vegetables." They ran to the house together, both soaked and breathless. As Mei Lin stood dripping in the kitchen, James handed her a towel and realized how pretty she was when she smiled, which she did so rarely these days. "Thank you," she said softly. "You kind man," under angry face. James felt his walls beginning to crack. Maybe he had been unfair. Maybe they both deserved a chance to start over. Over the following days, James began to notice things about Mei Lin he had missed. She sang softly while working, beautiful melodies in Chinese that filled the house with warmth. She had mended all his clothes without being asked, her stitching neat and careful. The meals she cooked were simple but flavorful, and she always made sure he had seconds. One evening, as they sat at opposite ends of the dinner table in their usual silence, James made a decision. "Mei Lin," he said, "would you like to learn to read English? I could teach you in the evenings." Her face lit up with the first genuine smile he had seen since her arrival. "Yes, please. I want to learn everything." They began meeting after dinner, James patiently teaching her letters and simple words. Mei Lin was a quick learner, hungry for knowledge. As she struggled with pronunciation, James found himself charmed by her determination and occasional frustrated sighs. "Why English so hard?" she asked one night after wrestling with irregular verb tenses. James laughed, the first real laughter he'd had in months. Even native speakers struggle with English sometimes. These evening lessons became the highlight of both their days. Slowly, walls began to come down. Mei Lin shared stories of her childhood in China, describing rice terraces and family traditions. James found himself telling her about his dreams for the ranch and, eventually, about his first wife and the pain of losing her. "Sarah was everything good and gentle," he said one night. "When she died, I thought I'd never want to care about anyone again." Mei Lin reached across the table and touched his hand briefly. "Love not gone, just sleeping. Maybe wake up when ready." Her simple wisdom surprised him. This woman he had dismissed as uneducated had depths he was only beginning to discover. But their growing connection didn't go unnoticed by others. Frank Henderson mentioned to James that some neighbors were talking about this strange arrangement at the Morrison Ranch. "People are saying you're not treating her like a proper wife," Frank said. "Some think you should make it official or send her away." This in-between situation is causing gossip. James realized that Mei Lin's reputation, and his own, was at stake. In a small community, appearances mattered. He needed to make a decision. Commit to the marriage or help her find another situation. That night, as they finished their lesson, James struggled with how to address the situation. Mei Lin sensed his mood and closed the book gently. "Something wrong?" she asked. "Mei Lin, we need to talk about our arrangement. People are talking, and it's not fair to you to live in this uncertainty." Her face went pale. She had come to hope that their friendship might bloom into something more, but his serious tone suggested otherwise. "You want me to leave," she said, not a question, but a statement of resignation. "I want to do what's best for both of us," James said carefully. "This situation isn't fair to you." Mei Lin nodded, fighting back tears. "I understand. I packed tonight." As she stood to leave, James caught her hand. The touch sent an unexpected shock through both of them. "Where would you go?" he asked quietly. "I'll find work somewhere. Clean houses, maybe. Learn more English." Her voice was steady, but her hand trembled in his. James looked at their joined hands and realized he didn't want to let go. Somewhere in the past weeks, this brave, kind woman had worked her way into his heart without him noticing. What if? He began, then stopped. What was he thinking? That they could make a real marriage work? That his growing feelings for her could overcome their differences and the circumstances that brought them together? Mei Lin waited, hope flickering in her eyes despite her efforts to prepare for rejection. "What if we tried to make this real?" James said finally. "Not just an arrangement, but a real marriage. I can't promise it would be easy, but maybe we could learn to be happy together." Mei Lin's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled through them. "You mean this? Not just feel sorry for me." "I mean it," James said, surprised by his own certainty. "I've come to care for you, Mei Lin. More than I expected to." She squeezed his hand. "I care for you too. Want to be a real wife, if you teach me how to be a good American wife." "You don't need to be anything but yourself," James said. "You're already more than I deserve." They sat together in the lamplight, hands joined, both nervous about the step they were taking, but hopeful for the first time since she had arrived. The next morning, Tom Bradley found them working side by side in the vegetable garden, James helping Mei Lin harvest the last of the autumn vegetables. Tom smiled to himself, recognizing the change in the air between them. "Morning, Mrs. Morrison," Tom said to Mei Lin with special emphasis on her title. She blushed and smiled. Good morning, Tom. We save many vegetables before frost come. James stood and put his hand on Mei Lin's shoulder, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed by the observant foreman. Tom, I want you to know that Mei Lin and I have decided to make our marriage a real one. I hope we can count on your support. Tom tipped his hat. About time, if you don't mind me saying so. Mrs. Morrison's been the best thing to happen to this place in years. As Tom walked away, Mei Lin looked up at James. He good man. Lucky you have a friend like him. Lucky I have you, James replied, meaning it more than he had expected to. But their decision to commit to each other would be tested sooner than they imagined. That afternoon, a stranger rode up to the ranch, a well-dressed Chinese man who introduced himself as Chun Wei, Mei Lin's cousin from San Francisco. Mei Lin, Chen said in Chinese, his face serious. I've come to take you home. Your family sent me when they heard about your situation here. Mei Lin's face went white as she translated for James. Her family had somehow learned that her marriage was not what it should be and had sent Chun to rescue her from what they perceived as a shameful situation. James felt his heart sink as he watched Mei Lin struggle with conflicting loyalties. She had just agreed to try to make their marriage work, but family obligation was sacred in her culture. How could she choose between her growing feelings for him and her duty to her family? Chen continued speaking in rapid Chinese, clearly trying to convince Mei Lin to leave with him immediately. She responded quietly, occasionally glancing at James with an expression of pain. Finally, she turned to James. He says family very worried. Think you not treat me as proper wife. Want me come to San Francisco, live with cousin until they find better husband. James felt panic rise in his chest. Just when he had realized what Mei Lin meant to him, she might be taken away. What did you tell him? James asked. I tell him I think about it, Mei Lin said softly. He stay night, take answer tomorrow. That evening was the longest of James's life. Chen had dinner with him, politely but coolly evaluating James while speaking to Mei Lin in Chinese. James could understand nothing, but felt judged by every glance. After Chan retired to the guest room, James and Mei Lin sat on the porch in heavy silence. The decision that had seemed so right that morning now felt fragile and uncertain. What does your heart tell you? James asked finally. Mei Lin was quiet for a long moment. Heart very confused. Family important in Chinese way. But, James prompted gently. But, I want to stay with you. I want to try and make real marriage work. Is that selfish? James took her hand. It's honest. And it's what I want too. They sat together under the stars, both knowing that tomorrow would bring a choice that would change both their lives forever. Whatever Mei Lin decided, James knew he would respect her choice, even if it broke his heart. The next morning would bring consequences neither of them expected, testing not just their growing love, but their courage to fight for the life they wanted to build together. As Mei Lin whispered into the darkness, I'll go at dawn. James felt his world begin to shatter, not knowing that dawn would bring not departure, but a moment that would bind them together forever. Dawn came too soon for both James and Mei Lin. Neither had slept much, both wrestling with thoughts of what the morning would bring. James sat on the edge of his bed, staring out the window as the sky lightened from black to deep purple. In the next room, he could hear quiet movement as Mei Lin prepared for what might be her final morning at the ranch. When James entered the kitchen, he found Mei Lin making breakfast as usual, but her movements were slow and deliberate, as if she were memorizing each action. Her small trunk sat by the door, packed and ready. Chen was already seated at the table, dressed for travel. Good morning, Chen said politely in heavily accented English. Mei Lin, tell me her decision. We leave after breakfast. James felt his heart stop. He looked at Mei Lin, but she kept her eyes on the stove, her shoulders tense. This was it then. She had chosen duty over the fragile beginning of whatever they might have had together. I see, James said quietly, trying to keep the devastation from his voice. I hope you'll be happy in San Francisco, Mei Lin. She still didn't look at him, but he saw her hand tremble as she stirred the eggs. Chen watched both of them with satisfaction, clearly pleased that his mission was succeeding. But as they sat down to eat, unexpected visitors arrived. Tom Bradley burst through the door, followed by Dr. William Hayes, the traveling doctor who served the scattered ranches in the area. James, Tom said urgently, we need Mei Lin's help. There's been an accident at the Henderson place. Little Emma fell from the hayloft and broke her leg badly. Doc Hayes is here, but Mrs. Henderson is near hysterical, and none of us can calm Emma down enough for him to set the bone properly. Dr. Hayes stepped forward, a gruff but kind man in his 60s. I heard Mrs. Morrison has a gentle way with children and speaks softly. The little girl is in terrible pain and frightened. We need someone who can keep her still while I work. Mei Lin immediately stood up. I help. Where's little girl? About 2 miles north, Tom said. We have a wagon ready. Chun frowned. But we must leave for San Francisco today. The stage, a child is hurt, Mei Lin said firmly, speaking to her cousin in Chinese. James couldn't understand the words, but her tone was clear. This was not negotiable. Chen argued back in rapid Chinese, but Mei Lin shook her head and began untying her apron. Whatever he was saying, she wasn't listening. I go help child, she announced to the room. Other things can wait. James felt a surge of admiration for her. Even facing the pressure of family obligation, her compassion came first. This was the woman he had fallen in love with, kind, strong, and guided by her heart. I'll come with you, James said. No need, Dr. Hayes began. I'm coming, James said firmly, looking directly at Mei Lin. If my wife is needed, then I'll be there too. The word wife hung in the air. Chen's eyes narrowed, but there was no time to argue. They climbed into the wagon, leaving Chun behind with obvious displeasure. The ride to the Henderson ranch was tense. Mei Lin sat between James and Dr. Hayes, her face set with determination. As they bounced along the rough road, James made a decision. Mei Lin, he said quietly, so only she could hear. Whatever you decide about San Francisco, I want you to know that these past weeks have meant everything to me. You've brought life back to my home and hope back to my heart. She looked at him with tears in her eyes. James, I know your family comes first. I understand. But I needed you to know how I feel before you go. Dr. Hayes coughed uncomfortably, pretending not to hear their conversation. But James didn't care who was listening. This might be his last chance to tell her the truth. When they reached the Henderson ranch, they found chaos. Frank Henderson paced the porch while his wife Mary sobbed in the kitchen. 5-year-old Emma lay on the parlor sofa, crying in pain while her older brother Jake tried unsuccessfully to comfort her. Oh, thank goodness you're here. Mary Henderson rushed to Dr. Hayes. She's been crying for an hour. The bone is definitely broken, but she won't let us touch her. Mei Lin went directly to Emma, kneeling beside the sofa. The little girl was red-faced and exhausted from crying, her left leg clearly bent at an unnatural angle. Hello, Emma, Mei Lin said softly. Yeah, Mei Lin. I come to help with hurt. Emma's crying quieted a little, curious about this gentle-voiced stranger with kind eyes. It hurts, Emma whimpered. I know hurt, Mei Lin said, stroking the child's hair. But doctor very good. He make hurt go away. You want to hear song while he work? Emma nodded through her tears. Mei Lin began to sing a soft Chinese lullaby, her voice like honey. The melody was haunting and beautiful, and everyone in the room fell silent listening to it. Dr. Hayes took advantage of the distraction to examine Emma's leg. It's a clean break, he murmured to James. I can set it, but she needs to stay perfectly still. Mei Lin continued singing, holding Emma's hand. You very brave girl, she whispered, like little bird with hurt wing. Doctor fix wing so you can fly again. Will you stay with me? Emma asked. I stay as long as you need, Mei Lin promised. Dr. Hayes worked quickly and skillfully while Mei Lin kept Emma calm with songs and gentle words. When it was over, Emma was exhausted, but no longer crying. The leg was properly set and splinted. You're a miracle worker, Dr. Hayes told Mei Lin. I've never seen a child stay so calm during a procedure like that. Mary Henderson hugged Mei Lin tightly. Thank you so much. You saved us all from a terrible ordeal. As they prepared to leave, Emma called out weakly. Mei Lin, will you come visit me? Mei Lin hesitated, glancing at James. If I can, little one. You get better now. The ride back to James's ranch was quiet. Dr. Hayes dozed in the corner of the wagon, exhausted from the morning's work. James and Mei Lin sat side by side, both lost in thought. You were wonderful with Emma, James said finally. Children are precious, Mei Lin replied. In China or America, children same. Need love and care when hurt. You'd make a wonderful mother, James said softly. Mei Lin's breath caught. They had never spoken of children, but the thought of having a family with James made her heart ache with longing. Could she really walk away from the possibility of building a life here? When they arrived back at the ranch, They found Chun waiting impatiently in the yard, his horse saddled and ready. "The stage leaves in 2 hours," he announced. "We must go now if we're to catch it." Dr. Hayes climbed down from the wagon and tipped his hat to Mei Lin. "Mrs. Morrison, it's been an honor working with you today. This community is lucky to have you." He rode away, leaving the three of them standing in uncomfortable silence. Chun looked expectantly at Mei Lin, clearly assuming she would collect her things and leave immediately. But Mei Lin stood frozen, looking back and forth between her cousin and James. The morning had changed something inside her. Helping Emma had reminded her of who she was, a healer, a nurturer, someone who made a difference in people's lives. Here at the ranch, she could be that person. In San Francisco, she would just be another burden on her cousin's family until they found her another husband. "Chun," she said carefully in Chinese, "I need more time to think." Chen's face darkened. He responded angrily, his voice rising. James didn't need to understand the words to know that Chen was not pleased. "What is he saying?" James asked. Mei Lin looked miserable. "He says family has decided. I must come now or bring great shame on everyone. He says if I stay with you, I am no longer part of family." James felt anger rise in his chest. How dare this man threaten Mei Lin with losing her family over a choice about her own life? But he forced himself to stay calm. This had to be Mei Lin's decision, made freely. "And what do you say?" James asked gently. Mei Lin was quiet for a long moment, tears streaming down her face. The choice was tearing her apart. Family was everything in her culture. To lose them would mean being completely alone in the world except for James. But staying with James meant the chance for real love, for children, for a life where she was valued and needed. "I say," she began, then stopped, looking at Chen's angry face. "Mei Lin," James said quietly, "whatever you choose, I'll respect it. But choose what's right for you, not what other people expect." Chun snapped something harsh in Chinese. Mei Lin flinched as if he had slapped her. "What did he say?" James demanded. "He says I'm selfish and ungrateful, that I forget my place." Mei Lin's voice was barely a whisper. Something snapped inside James. He stepped closer to Chun, his own anger finally breaking free. "Now you listen to me," James said, his voice deadly quiet. "Mei Lin is my wife, and this is her home. You can deliver whatever message you want to her family, but you will not stand in my yard and call her names." Chun straightened, clearly not expecting this defense from James. He responded in English this time. "She belonged to family first. Marriage arrangement only. She come home now." "No," Mei Lin said suddenly, her voice stronger than it had been all morning. Both men turned to look at her in surprise. "No," Chen repeated. "No," Mei Lin said more firmly. "I choose stay with husband. Make real life here." Chen's face went white with shock and anger. He launched into a furious tirade in Chinese, but Mei Lin stood straighter and answered him back, her own voice rising. James watched in amazement as this gentle woman found her backbone and stood up to her cousin's bullying. Whatever she was saying, it was clear she was not backing down. Finally, Chun fell silent, breathing hard. He looked at Mei Lin with a mixture of disappointment and disgust. "You choose stranger over family," he said in English. "Then you're no family to us." He mounted his horse and rode away without another word, leaving Mei Lin and James standing alone in the yard. Mei Lin's shoulders shook as she watched him disappear, realizing the magnitude of what she had just done. "Oh, James," she whispered, "what have I done? I have no family now." James pulled her into his arms, holding her close as she sobbed. "You have me," he said fiercely. "You have me and Tom and the Hendersons and everyone in this community who cares about you. You're not alone, Mei Lin. You'll never be alone again." They stood together in the afternoon sun, both knowing that their decision to commit to each other was now irrevocable. There was no going back to China, no safety net of family approval. They only had each other and whatever love they could build together. "Are you sorry?" James asked when her crying subsided. Mei Lin pulled back to look at him, her eyes red but determined. "No sorry for choosing you. Scared but not sorry." "Good," James said, wiping tears from her cheeks. "Because I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this choice." That evening, they sat on the porch together, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Mei Lin's trunk had been unpacked, and her few possessions put away in what was now truly their shared home. "Tomorrow I go to town," James said. Talk to Reverend Walsh about performing a proper ceremony. Make our marriage official in the eyes of the church and the law. And in eyes of God, Mei Lin added quietly. And in the eyes of God, James agreed. As the stars came out, Mei Lin leaned against James's shoulder, finally, allowing herself to believe that this life could truly be hers. The morning had brought fear and uncertainty, but it had ended with hope and love. I was so afraid of dawn, she confessed. Thought I would have to leave everything good behind. Instead, you chose to fight for what you wanted, James said. That took incredible courage. Love make people brave, Mei Lin said simply. James kissed the top of her head, marveling at the woman who had turned his quiet, lonely ranch into a home. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as they built their life together, but tonight they had each other, and that was enough. In the distance, a coyote howled at the moon, and Mei Lin shivered slightly. James pulled her closer, and she smiled, knowing that whatever wild things the night might hold, she was safe in his arms. Their real journey as husband and wife was just beginning. 3 months after Chen's departure, the Morrison Ranch had transformed into something neither James nor Mei Lin had imagined possible. What had begun as a practical arrangement had blossomed into genuine partnership and deepening love. Their official church ceremony had been simple, but meaningful, with Tom Bradley as witness and half the county in attendance, drawn by curiosity, but leaving with genuine affection for the gentle Chinese woman who had won their gruff neighbor's heart. Winter had settled over the land, bringing with it the quiet months that allowed couples to truly know each other. James and Mei Lin spent long evenings by the fire, reading together and planning for spring. Mei Lin's English had improved remarkably, and she had begun teaching James simple phrases in Chinese, delighting in his clumsy pronunciation of words that flowed like music from her lips. But their newfound happiness faced an unexpected test when Mary Henderson arrived one snowy morning, her face pale with worry. Mei Lin, James, she said breathlessly as they welcomed her into the warm kitchen. I need your help. It's Emma. The little girl they had helped 3 months ago had developed a persistent cough that wouldn't go away. Dr. Hayes was snowed in at a ranch 30 miles north, and Mary was beside herself with worry. She's been getting weaker, Mary explained, her hands shaking as she accepted a cup of tea from Mei Lin. The cough keeps her awake at night, and she's barely eating. Frank rode out to try to reach Doc Hayes, but the snow's too deep. Mei Lin exchanged a look with James. She had been learning about local herbs and remedies from Tom Bradley's wife before she passed away, and her grandmother in China had taught her traditional healing methods. But she was reluctant to suggest anything that might be seen as foreign or dangerous. What does Emma's cough sound like? Mei Lin asked carefully. Mary demonstrated with a harsh, barking sound that made both James and Mei Lin wince. Mei Lin recognized it immediately. It was the same cough that had nearly taken her youngest brother's life when she was 15. In China, Mei Lin said hesitantly, my grandmother used special tea for cough like this. But I don't do anything that might hurt Emma. Please, Mary begged. I'll try anything. She's getting worse every day. James put his hand on Mei Lin's shoulder. You saved Emma before. If you think you can help her again, we should try. Mei Lin nodded slowly. I need special herbs. Some I have dried from autumn gathering. Others. She paused, thinking. Mrs. Patterson, the widow near town, she has good herb garden. Maybe she helped. Within an hour, they were trudging through the snow to Emma's bedside. The little girl was indeed much worse than when they had last seen her, her face flushed with fever, and her breathing labored. She managed a weak smile when she saw Mei Lin. You came back, Emma whispered. Of course I come back, Mei Lin said gently, feeling Emma's forehead with practiced concern. You're a special friend. I bring medicine to make cough go away. Over the next 3 days, Mei Lin barely left Emma's side. She prepared carefully measured doses of herbal tea made from wild cherry bark, elderberry flowers, and other plants she had gathered and dried. She showed Mary how to create steam tents to help Emma breathe easier and taught her gentle massage techniques to ease the child's chest congestion. James watched in amazement as his wife transformed into a confident healer. The shy woman who had arrived at his ranch 6 months ago had discovered her calling. Other neighbors began arriving, drawn by word that the Chinese woman had special knowledge of healing. Mrs. Patterson came with her rheumatic joints. Old Mr. Kelly arrived with persistent stomach troubles. Each received Mei Lin's careful attention and gentle remedies. "You're turning into the town doctor," James told her one evening as they walked home through the snow after another long day at Emma's bedside. "Not doctor," Mei Lin corrected. "Just woman who learned from grandmother. In China, women in village help each other this way." "Well, this village needs you," James said proudly. "Emma's cough is almost gone, and I've never seen Mary so relieved." But Mei Lin's growing reputation as a healer brought unexpected complications. Dr. Hayes finally arrived in the area just as Emma was fully recovering. He was a good man, but set in his ways, and he viewed Mei Lin's methods with suspicion. "I appreciate that you helped while I was unavailable," he told her stiffly when they met at the Henderson Ranch. "But in the future, it would be better to wait for proper medical attention rather than experimenting with folk remedies." Mei Lin bowed her head respectfully. "I only want to help when no other help available." "Foreign medicines can be dangerous," Dr. Hayes continued. "People here aren't accustomed to such things." Mary Henderson, who had been listening from the kitchen doorway, stepped forward with Emma in her arms. The little girl was bright-eyed and healthy, clinging to a small doll that Mei Lin had made for her during her recovery. "Dr. Hayes," Mary said firmly, "Mrs. Morrison saved my daughter's life. I don't care if her methods come from China or the moon. They worked when nothing else could." Other neighbors murmured agreement. Word of Mei Lin's success had spread quickly through the small community, and several people had brought their own ailments to her for treatment. The results spoke for themselves. Dr. Hayes looked around at the gathered neighbors, realizing that his criticism wasn't being well received. "Of course, I'm glad the child recovered," he said carefully. "I merely suggest caution in the future." After he left, James found Mei Lin sitting quietly by herself, obviously troubled by the encounter. "Don't let him worry you," James said, sitting beside her. "You've helped more people in the past week than he has in the past month." "Maybe you're right," Mei Lin said softly. "Maybe I should not give medicine to American people. What if something goes wrong? What if I hurt someone?" James took her hands in his. "Mei Lin, look at Emma. Look at Mrs. Patterson walking without pain for the first time in years. Look at Mr. Kelly actually eating a full meal. You have a gift. Don't let one man's narrow thinking make you doubt yourself." Their conversation was interrupted by a frantic knocking at the door. Tom Bradley burst in, his face grim with worry. "James, Mei Lin, we need help. There's been an accident at the lumber mill. Young Peter Williams got his hand caught in the saw. It's bad, real bad. Doc Hayes is with him, but he's asking for Mei Lin." They grabbed their coats and medical supplies, rushing through the snow to the mill where a crowd had gathered. Inside, they found Dr. Hayes working frantically over Peter Williams, a 17-year-old boy who worked part-time at the mill. The boy's hand was badly mangled, bleeding heavily despite the doctor's efforts to stop it. "I can't get the bleeding to stop, Dr. Hayes said without looking up. "I need your help with those herbs you used on the Henderson girl. Something to slow the bleeding and prevent infection." Mei Lin immediately went to work combining yarrow and comfrey with honey to create a poultice. She worked alongside Dr. Hayes without hesitation, their earlier conflict forgotten in the face of a medical emergency. Together, they managed to clean and dress the wound, though it was clear Peter would never have full use of his hand again. "Your quick thinking saved this boy from bleeding to death," Dr. Hayes told Mei Lin as they cleaned up afterward. "I owe you an apology. Your knowledge is clearly valuable, even if it's different from what I learned in medical school." "We both want to help people," Mei Lin said simply. "Maybe we work together sometimes?" Dr. Hayes nodded thoughtfully. "I think that would benefit everyone. Perhaps you could teach me some of your methods, and I could share what I know about anatomy and disease." This marked the beginning of an unlikely partnership. Dr. Hayes began visiting the Morrison Ranch regularly, and Mei Lin accompanied him on his rounds to more remote homesteads. Their combined knowledge proved invaluable during the harsh winter months when injuries and illnesses were common. James watched his wife grow in confidence and skill, proud of the respect she had earned from their community. But he also noticed the toll the constant demands for her help were taking. She rarely turned anyone away, often working long hours for no payment beyond a loaf of bread or a basket of preserved vegetables. One evening in late February, James found Mei Lin slumped over the kitchen table, exhausted after a difficult day delivering twin babies at a remote ranch. She had been gone for nearly 24 hours, and her face was drawn with fatigue. "You can't keep this up," James said gently, helping her to a chair by the fire. You're wearing yourself out. People need help, Mei Lin said wearily. How can I say no when mother might lose babies without help? You can't save everyone, Mei Lin. And if you make yourself sick, you won't be able to help anyone. As if to prove his point, Mei Lin suddenly swayed in her chair, her face going pale. James caught her before she could fall, alarmed by how warm her skin felt. You're burning up with fever, he said, scooping her into his arms. You're going to bed right now. For the next 3 days, James found himself in the unfamiliar role of caregiver as Mei Lin battled exhaustion and illness. She had pushed herself too hard for too long, and her body had finally demanded rest. Dr. Hayes visited daily, ironically treating the healer who had become his partner. She'll be fine, he assured James. But she needs to learn to pace herself. The whole county can't depend on one woman's shoulders. As Mei Lin recovered, James made a decision. When she was well enough to sit up and take notice, he presented her with a proposal. I've been talking to Dr. Hayes and some of the other men, James said, sitting on the edge of their bed. We think it's time this community had a proper clinic. Somewhere people can come for help instead of calling you out in all kinds of weather. Mei Lin looked at him with interest, but also concern. Clinic costs much money. Who pay for such thing? Everyone, James said with a smile. The whole community. We've already had 2 meetings about it. People want to contribute what they can, labor, materials, money. Mrs. Patterson is donating the land next to her place in town. Tom Bradley and his sons will do most of the building. Even Dr. Hayes is excited about it. Tears filled Mei Lin's eyes. You do this for me? We're doing it for everyone, James said, but his warm smile told her the truth. This community needs a place where healing can happen, where people can come for help without traveling 50 miles to the nearest real doctor. And it needs someone gentle and skilled to run it. The project consumed the rest of the winter and all of the following spring. Men from every ranch and farm in the area contributed time and labor. Women organized fundraising events and sewed curtains and bedding. Children helped by carrying tools and fetching water for the workers. Mei Lin threw herself into planning the clinic, working with Dr. Hayes to design a space that would serve their community's needs. She studied his medical books and shared her knowledge of herbal remedies and traditional healing practices. Their partnership had evolved into genuine friendship and mutual respect. James watched it all with deep satisfaction. His wife had found her calling, and their community had gained something precious, a place of healing guided by wisdom from 2 different worlds. The clinic opened in early summer with a celebration that brought together people from 3 counties. Emma Henderson, now fully recovered and energetic as ever, cut the ribbon with Dr. Hayes and Mei Lin standing proudly beside her. This is what happens when a community comes together, James said in his brief speech. When we stop seeing differences and start seeing possibilities. That evening, as they walked through their empty clinic for the first time as its official operators, Mei Lin leaned against James's shoulder. When I first came here, I thought I was so small, she said softly. Just poor girl from China, maybe not good enough for American husband. Now look what we build together. We built it because of who you are, James replied. Because you showed us what real caring looks like. Because you never gave up on helping people, even when it was hard. They stood in the moonlight streaming through the clinic windows, surrounded by the clean smell of fresh wood and new beginnings. Tomorrow would bring their first official patients, but tonight was for remembering how far they had traveled together. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had gone with Chun that day, Mei Lin mused. James pulled her closer. I try not to think about that. But I know this. You made the choice that led to all of this. You chose love over duty, hope over safety. And look what grew from that choice. In the distance, they could hear music and laughter from the celebration continuing at the church hall. Their community was celebrating not just a new clinic, but the proof that people from different worlds could come together and create something beautiful. As they locked up the clinic and headed home, Mei Lin smiled at the sign hanging by the door. Morrison Community Clinic, healing for all. Below it, in smaller letters, were the words that meant the most to her. Where Eastern wisdom meets Western medicine. She had found her place in this new world, not by abandoning who she was, but by sharing her gifts with open hearts. And in the process, she had discovered that home wasn't a place you came from. It was a place you helped create, one act of love and healing at a time. The shy, frightened girl who had whispered, "I'll go at dawn," had become a woman who stayed to build something lasting. And the lonely rancher who had nearly sent her away had learned that sometimes the greatest gifts come in unexpected packages, requiring only the courage to say yes to love. The Morrison Community Clinic had been operating successfully for nearly a year when unexpected news arrived that would test everything James and Mei Lin had built together. It came in the form of a letter delivered by the weekly mail rider, addressed to Mrs. James Morrison in careful, educated handwriting. Mei Lin stared at the envelope with growing dread as she recognized the characters written in the corner, her name in Chinese, confirming her worst fears. This was from her family. "What is it?" James asked, noticing her pale face as she stood frozen by their kitchen table. "Letter from home," Mei Lin whispered. "From China." James set down his coffee cup carefully. They had not heard anything from Mei Lin's family since Chen's angry departure over a year ago. The silence had been painful for Mei Lin, but they had both hoped it meant her family had accepted her choice. With trembling fingers, Mei Lin opened the letter. As she read, her face went from pale to white as winter snow. James watched her shoulders shake as she struggled through the formal Chinese characters. "What does it say?" he asked gently. Mei Lin sank into a chair, the letter fluttering to the table. "My father is very sick, maybe dying. My brother writes to tell me." James felt his heart clench. Despite everything that had happened, he knew Mei Lin still loved her family deeply. The silence between them had been one of her greatest sorrows. "I am sorry, Mei Lin. What else does the letter say?" Mei Lin picked up the paper again, her hands shaking. "Brother says father asked for me before he dies. Wants to." She paused, struggling with the translation. "Wants to make peace. To see daughter one more time." "That's good news, isn't it?" James asked hopefully. "Maybe they want to reconcile." But Mei Lin's expression remained troubled. "Brother also writes that father very angry about stories he heard. Someone told him I live like unmarried woman, that I practice foreign medicine instead of being proper wife. He thinks I bring shame to family name." James felt anger rise in his chest. "What stories? Who would say such things?" "I think maybe Chun," Mei Lin said sadly. "When he returned to San Francisco, maybe he told family bad things to explain why I not come with him." The letter continued with more disturbing news. Mei Lin's brother wrote that their father was demanding she return to China to prove she was still an honorable daughter. If she came back, showed proper respect, and agreed to give up her Western ways, the family would welcome her home and find her a suitable Chinese husband. "They want me to leave everything," Mei Lin said quietly. "Leave clinic, leave you. Come home and be daughter they want me to be." James felt his world tilting. "And if you don't go?" "Father says I am no longer his child. Family will perform death ceremony for me. In their eyes, I will be dead." The weight of the ultimatum settled over them both. Mei Lin was being forced to choose between the family she had grown up loving and the life she had built with James. There was no middle ground, no compromise being offered. For the next several days, Mei Lin was quiet and withdrawn. She continued her work at the clinic, but James could see the internal struggle consuming her. She had found peace with her earlier decision to stay, but the thought of her father dying while believing she had dishonored the family was torture for her. "What does your heart tell you?" James asked one evening as they sat in their parlor, the fire crackling quietly between them. "Heart is confused," Mei Lin admitted. "I love my father. He is a good man who worked very hard to give children better life. In his mind, he saved money to send me to America for good marriage, and I threw away his gift. But you didn't throw it away. You made it into something better than he imagined. He not see it that way. In China, daughter who disobeys father brings shame on whole family. My choice affects my brother's marriage chances, my mother's place in community. It's not just about me." James understood the cultural weight Mei Lin carried, but he also knew what her leaving would do to him and to their community. The clinic had become the heart of their small world, serving people from 3 counties. Dr. Hayes, now in his 70s, had come to depend on Mei Lin's skills and knowledge. Without her, many people would suffer. But more than that, James couldn't imagine his life without her. Over the past year and a half, she had become so integral to who he was that the thought of losing her felt like contemplating the loss of his own soul. 3 days later, the decision was taken out of their hands. Tom Bradley rode up to the clinic in the middle of the afternoon, his horse lathered and his face grim. "James, Mei Lin," he called as he dismounted quickly. There's been a cave-in at the new silver mine up in the hills. Multiple men trapped. Dr. Hayes is already on his way, but he'll need all the help he can get. They grabbed their medical supplies and rode hard for the mining camp, arriving to find chaos. 15 men had been working in the new tunnel when it collapsed. 7 had made it out with minor injuries, but 8 were still trapped behind tons of rock and dirt. The rescue effort was already underway, with men working frantically to dig through the debris. Dr. Hayes was treating the injured miners who had escaped, but his face was pale with exhaustion and worry. "Thank God you're here," he told Mei Lin as she knelt beside a man with a badly crushed arm. "2 of the men we brought out have internal injuries I can't properly assess, and we don't know what condition the trapped men will be in when we reach them." For the next 18 hours, Mei Lin worked without rest. She treated broken bones, internal bleeding, and severe cuts from the cave-in. When the rescue team finally broke through to the trapped miners, they found 3 men dead and 5 barely alive, suffering from dehydration, exposure, and various injuries. Mei Lin's knowledge of herbal medicine proved crucial in treating the survivors. She used willow bark tea to reduce fever and inflammation, applied poultices of comfrey and calendula to wounds, and carefully administered doses of digitalis to strengthen the heart of one miner who had nearly died from shock. By dawn, all 5 of the rescued men were stable and expected to recover. The mining camp looked like a battlefield, but the living would go home to their families. As they rode back to town, Dr. Hayes turned to Mei Lin with deep respect in his eyes. "You saved lives yesterday that I couldn't have saved alone," he told her. "Your knowledge, your skill, your stamina. This community is blessed to have you." James saw the impact the doctor's words had on his wife. She had discovered not just her calling, but her true value. She wasn't just a woman trying to fit into a new culture. She was a healer whose unique knowledge could mean the difference between life and death for people who had become her friends and neighbors. That evening, as news of the rescue spread through the community, people began arriving at the Morrison Ranch. They came to thank Mei Lin, to check on her after her exhausting ordeal, and to express their gratitude for everything she had done for their community. Emma Henderson, now 7 years old and healthy as a horse, presented Mei Lin with a drawing she had made of the clinic. Mrs. Patterson brought a fresh apple pie and tears in her eyes. Even crusty old Mr. Kelly showed up with a bouquet of wildflowers and an awkward speech about how Mei Lin had given him back his health and his hope. "You see," James said quietly as they watched their neighbors gathered in their front yard, sharing food and stories. "This is your family, too. These people love you and depend on you." Mei Lin looked around at the faces of people she had helped heal, children she had delivered, families she had comforted through loss, and celebrated with joy. They weren't connected to her by blood, but they were connected by something equally strong: mutual care, respect, and love. The next morning, Mei Lin sat down at their kitchen table with pen and paper. She had made her decision, but writing it down felt like carving it in stone. "I am writing letter to my brother," she told James. "What will you tell him?" Mei Lin was quiet for a long moment, choosing her words carefully. "I tell him I love Father very much, but I cannot come home. I tell him I am married to a good man who treats me with respect and love. I tell him I use skills grandmother taught me to help people who need healing. I tell him I am not ashamed of life I have built." She paused, wiping away tears that had started to fall. "And I tell him that if Father performs death ceremony for me, it will not change who I am. I will still be his daughter, even if he cannot accept that." James read over the letter when she finished. Written in a mixture of simple English and Chinese characters, it was both heartbreaking and proud. Mei Lin was choosing her new life definitively, but she was doing it with love and respect for the family she was leaving behind. "Are you sure?" James asked softly. "I am sure," Mei Lin said firmly. "My grandmother always said that plants grow toward the light, even if it means leaving the shade of the tree that raised them. I have found my light here, with you, with our community. I cannot go back to the shade, even for love of family." They mailed the letter that afternoon, and with it went the last of Mei Lin's uncertainty about where she belonged. She would always mourn the loss of her family's approval, but she had found something equally precious, a place where she was valued for exactly who she was. 2 weeks later, another letter arrived from China. This one was shorter and came from a different hand, Mei Lin's mother, writing in secret. She says, "Father, very angry about my letter." Mei Lin translated for James, her eyes bright with tears. But Mother says she is proud of daughter who became healer and helper. She says grandmother will be proud too. The letter contained a small package wrapped in silk, a jade pendant that had belonged to Mei Lin's grandmother, the woman who had taught her about herbs and healing. Mother says this is to remember where my knowledge comes from, Mei Lin said, holding the cool jade against her cheek. To remember that healing is sacred work, no matter where it happens. That evening, they walked through town together as they often did, checking on patients and enjoying the warm summer air. The clinic was busy, as always, with people coming and going. Dr. Hayes waved at them from his office window, where he was studying one of the Chinese medical texts Mei Lin had sent away for. "Do you ever regret it?" James asked as they paused by the church where they had renewed their vows the previous spring. "Giving up your family for this life?" Mei Lin looked around at the town that had become her home, at the clinic that bore their name, at the man who had learned to love her stubborn independence as much as her gentle heart. "I did not give up family," she said softly. "I chose different family. Family you build with love is just as real as family you born into." James pulled her close, still amazed by this woman who had transformed his life and their entire community. "I love you, Mrs. Morrison." "I love you too, Mr. Morrison," she replied, her English now almost perfectly fluent, but still colored by the musical tones of her native language. As they walked home hand in hand, Mei Lin touched the jade pendant in her throat and smiled. She carried her grandmother's wisdom and her mother's love with her always, but she had planted them in new soil and watched them bloom into something beautiful and unique. The frightened girl who had whispered about leaving at dawn had become a woman who had chosen to stay and fight for the life she wanted. And in staying, she had discovered that sometimes the greatest courage isn't in leaving, but in planting roots and growing where you are needed most. Behind them, the clinic stood ready for whatever tomorrow might bring, a testament to what could be built when love was chosen over fear, when different worlds came together in the service of healing, and when two people decided that the family they created together was worth any sacrifice. 5 years had passed since the mining accident, and the Morrison Community Clinic had grown into something far beyond what anyone had imagined. What started as a simple building with basic medical supplies had evolved into a center of healing that drew people from across the territory. Mei Lin's reputation as a skilled healer had spread far and wide, bringing visitors who came specifically to learn from the Chinese woman who could cure ailments that had baffled other doctors. But the greatest change wasn't in the clinic or in Mei Lin's growing reputation. It was in the Morrison household itself. On a crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves danced in the wind outside their bedroom window, Mei Lin felt the familiar flutter of movement in her belly and placed her hand protectively over the growing life within her. She was 6 months pregnant with their first child, a blessing that had come after 3 years of hope and disappointment. At 32, Mei Lin had begun to worry that motherhood might never be possible for her, but James had remained patient and optimistic, always ready to comfort her during the difficult months when her hopes were dashed. "Good morning, little one," she whispered to her unborn baby, as had become her daily ritual. "Today we have much work to do, but you rest and grow strong." James appeared in the doorway, carrying a breakfast tray with the special ginger tea that helped settle Mei Lin's morning queasiness. At 41, he looked younger and happier than he had in years, the lines around his eyes coming more from laughter than from worry. "How are my 2 favorite people this morning?" he asked, settling the tray on the bedside table and leaning down to kiss Mei Lin's forehead. "We are well," Mei Lin smiled, using the pronoun that had become natural when referring to herself and their child. "Baby is very active today. I think he will be strong like father, or she will be wise like mother," James countered, as they had many times before. They had chosen not to guess about the baby's gender, preferring to be surprised, but both secretly hoped for a healthy child who would inherit the best of both their worlds. Their peaceful morning was interrupted by urgent knocking at their front door. Tom Bradley, now graying but still spry at 55, stood on their porch with worry etched on his weathered face. "James, Mei Lin," he said quickly, "we need your help at the clinic." A family of travelers came through town in the night. Their youngest child is very sick, high fever, trouble breathing. Dr. Hayes took one look and said we needed Mei Lin right away. Mei Lin was already reaching for a medical bag before Tom finished speaking. Despite her pregnancy, she continued to work at the clinic, though James worried constantly about her overexerting herself. "You don't have to go," James said gently. "Dr. Hayes can handle. A child is sick," Mei Lin interrupted firmly. "Ego kropka." James knew better than to argue when Mei Lin used that tone. Her dedication to healing had only grown stronger with her pregnancy, as if carrying new life had deepened her understanding of how precious and fragile life could be. At the clinic, they found a scene of controlled chaos. Dr. Hayes was examining a little boy who couldn't have been more than 3 years old, while the child's parents, a young couple traveling west to Oregon, watched with the desperate look of people who had been fighting this battle for days. "Thank goodness you're here," Dr. Hayes said when he saw Mei Lin. "The child has all the symptoms of pneumonia, but he's not responding to any of my treatments. The fever just keeps climbing." Mei Lin approached the examination table carefully, her trained eye taking in every detail of the little boy's condition. His breathing was shallow and labored, his skin pale except for the hectic flush of fever on his cheeks. But it was something else that caught her attention, a particular smell, barely detectable but familiar from her childhood. "How long has he been sick?" she asked the parents gently. "For days," the mother replied, her voice hoarse from crying. "It started as just a cold, but then the fever came and wouldn't break. We've tried everything." Mei Lin nodded thoughtfully, then began her own examination, her touch gentle but thorough. As she checked the child's throat and chest, she spoke softly to him in Chinese, her musical voice seeming to calm him despite his distress. "What do you think?" Dr. Hayes asked quietly. "Not pneumonia," Mei Lin said with certainty. "This is different illness. In China, we call it fire in the throat. Very dangerous for small children, but can be treated if caught in time." She immediately began preparing a complex herbal treatment, combining ingredients she kept for the most serious cases. As she worked, she explained to Dr. Hayes and the worried parents what she was doing and why. "The child's body is fighting infection, but it is fighting too hard," she said, carefully measuring powdered herbs into a small pot. "Western medicine wants to stop fever, but fever not the problem. Problem is inflammation blocking air passages. We must reduce swelling first, then help body fight infection more gently." Over the next 6 hours, Mei Lin worked tirelessly to save the little boy's life. She administered carefully timed doses of her herbal medicines, used steam treatments to help him breathe, and taught his parents special massage techniques to keep his chest clear. James stayed nearby, bringing supplies and quietly supporting her as her pregnancy made the long hours of standing increasingly difficult. As evening approached, the child's fever finally began to break. His breathing became easier, and for the first time in days, he opened his eyes and looked around with recognition. "Mama," he whispered, reaching weak arms toward his mother. The woman burst into tears of relief, gathering her son to her chest while her husband gripped Dr. Hayes's hand in gratitude. But it was to Mei Lin that they turned with the deepest thanks. "You saved our boy," the father said, his voice thick with emotion. "We can never repay you for this." "No need for payment," Mei Lin said, exhaustion finally showing in her voice. "Helping children is reward enough." As the family settled in for the night at the local boarding house, Dr. Hayes turned to Mei Lin with admiration and concern. "That was remarkable work," he said. "I've never seen anything like it. But you need to rest now. You've been on your feet all day, and the baby is fine," Mei Lin assured him, but James could see the fatigue in her eyes. Strong baby, like mother. James helped her home, where she finally allowed herself to sink into their comfortable parlor chair with a sigh of relief. As James brought her dinner and rubbed her swollen feet, Mei Lin reflected on the day. "I was thinking," she said softly, "about what kind of world we are bringing this baby into. What kind of mother I will be." "You'll be a wonderful mother," James said without hesitation. "Look at how you care for other people's children. Look at how you fought for that little boy today." "But will I be Chinese mother or American mother?" Mei Lin asked, voicing a worry that had been growing throughout her pregnancy. "How do I teach child about both worlds when sometimes they seem so different?" James sat beside her, taking her hands in his. "You'll be yourself. You'll teach our child what your grandmother taught you about healing and wisdom. You'll teach them about kindness and hard work and fighting for what's right. And You'll teach them that love is the same in any language. Their conversation was interrupted by a soft knock at the door. James opened it to find Emma Henderson, now 12 years old and blossoming into a confident young lady. In her arms, she carried a carefully wrapped bundle. "Mrs. Morrison," Emma said shyly, "I heard about the sick little boy and how you saved him. I wanted to bring you this." She unwrapped a beautiful baby blanket that she had obviously spent weeks knitting herself. The wool was soft and white with delicate blue and yellow flowers embroidered around the border. "I learned to knit from Grandmother Patterson," Emma explained. "I wanted to make something special for your baby, to thank you for saving me when I was little." Mei Lin's eyes filled with tears as she accepted the gift. This young girl, whom she had helped heal years ago, was now returning the kindness in her own way. "Emma, this is most beautiful gift," Mei Lin said, holding the blanket against her cheek. "Baby will be very lucky to have this. Will you teach me some of your healing ways when I'm older?" Emma asked hopefully. "I want to help people like you do. If parents agree, I would be honored to teach you," Mei Lin replied. Healing knowledge should pass to next generation. After Emma left, James found Mei Lin sitting quietly with the blanket spread across her lap, tears still glistening in her eyes. "What is it?" he asked gently. "I was thinking about that little boy today, and about Emma, and about our baby," Mei Lin said softly. "I realized something important. I worry about what kind of mother I will be, but really the question is what kind of world we are making for our children." "What do you mean?" "This community, this clinic, the way people help each other. We are building something good here. Chinese way, American way, it not matter. What matters is that we create a place where children can grow up safe and loved and cared for when they are sick." James nodded, understanding. Their work at the clinic wasn't just about healing individual ailments. It was about creating a community where different cultures and knowledge systems could work together for the common good. "Our child will grow up seeing that," James agreed. "Seeing that people from different places can come together and make something beautiful." 3 months later, on the first day of spring, their daughter was born. The delivery was attended by Dr. Hayes and Mary Henderson, with Tom Bradley nervously pacing outside until he heard the healthy cry that announced the successful arrival. James held his daughter for the first time as Mei Lin rested, marveling at the perfect tiny features that seemed to blend the best of both parents. She had James's strong jaw and Mei Lin's delicate eyes, and her skin held the golden undertones that spoke of her mixed heritage. "What should we call her?" James asked softly. Mei Lin had been thinking about this for months. In Chinese tradition, children get a name that means something good for their future. "I want to call her Hope, Hope Morrison, because she represents hope for our future, hope for this community, hope that different worlds can come together and create something beautiful." "Hope Morrison," James repeated, testing the name. "I like it. Hope it is." Dr. Hayes examined the baby and pronounced her perfectly healthy, while Mary Henderson fussed over both mother and child with the expertise of someone who had raised 5 children of her own. "She's going to be a heartbreaker," Mary predicted. "Look at those eyes. She's going to be just as smart as her mother and just as stubborn as her father." As word of Hope's birth spread through the community, visitors began arriving with gifts and congratulations. The little house filled with neighbors bringing food, flowers, and handmade gifts for the new baby. It was like a celebration of everything the community had become, people of different backgrounds and beliefs coming together to welcome a new life. Emma Henderson arrived with a children's book she had written and illustrated herself, telling the story of a brave Chinese healer who came to America and saved many people. Mrs. Patterson brought herbs for nursing mothers and a rocking chair her late husband had made. Even crusty, old Mr. Kelly showed up with a wooden toy horse he had carved during the long winter evenings. That evening, as their guests finally departed and the house settled into quiet, James and Mei Lin sat together with their newborn daughter, sleeping peacefully between them. "She's perfect," James whispered, afraid to speak too loudly and wake the baby. "She is beginning," Mei Lin replied softly. "Beginning of our family, beginning of new generation that knows both worlds are good." "Do you think she'll want to learn about China when she's older?" James asked. "I hope so. I will teach her language, teach her about grandmother's wisdom, teach her about place she comes from. But she is an American girl too. She will make her own path." James looked at his wife and daughter, thinking about everything that had brought them to this moment. The frightened girl who had whispered about leaving at dawn had become a confident woman who had chosen to stay and build something lasting. The rejected bride had become a beloved healer and now a cherished mother. "I love you, Maylin Morrison," he said quietly. "I love you too, James Morrison," she replied. "And I love our daughter, and I love this life we have built together." Outside, the spring wind rustled through the new leaves on the trees they had planted around their home. In the distance, they could see the lights still burning in the clinic, where Dr. Hayes was spending the night with the traveling family whose little boy was now fully recovered. Hope stirred in her sleep, making the small, contented sounds of a well-fed, well-loved baby. Her parents watched over her, both thinking about the future they wanted to give her, a future where she would know she was loved exactly as she was, where her mixed heritage would be seen as a blessing rather than a burden, where she would grow up understanding that home is what you build with the people you love. The woman who had once been so afraid of not being enough had created a life overflowing with love, purpose, and hope. And the rancher who had nearly sent her away had learned that sometimes the greatest gifts come when you have the courage to open your heart to something unexpected. In the quiet of their home, surrounded by the evidence of their shared life, and holding their precious daughter, James, and Maylin Morrison knew they had found exactly what they were meant to find. Not just love, but a way to make the world a little bit better for the next generation. The rejected Chinese bride had become something far more valuable, a beloved wife, a respected healer, a treasured friend, and now a devoted mother. She had whispered about leaving at dawn, but she had stayed to see every sunrise since, and each one had brought new reasons to be grateful for the courage to choose love over fear. As Hope slept peacefully in her parents' arms, she was surrounded by the story of how two lonely people had found each other across an ocean of difference and built something beautiful together, something that would endure long after their own story was finished, passed down through generations as proof that love really can conquer all.